Now, the next person that's walked in, and I'm proud to call her Sister Yvonne Ridley, you'll have missed all the kind remarks about your good work that Lord Nazir Ahmed made. He tried to elongate his speech so you could hear some of the practical issues you've engaged in, and of course Sagir from caged prisoners. And I think the audience here has been somewhat wanting to hear directly from yourself, and of course your involvement with people like Lord Ahmed, Tariq Insaf, Imran, your trip to Pakistan, for Dr.Afia. Without further ado, can you welcome Sister Yvonne?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that if it hadn't been for the help of Lord Ahmed, this investigation would never have gone off the ground, because the Americans, when I asked them about who is this woman prisoner in Bagram, they said I was a fantasist. They said I was mad, that I was imagining it, that prisoner 650, the Grey Lady, did not exist. Thankfully, Lord Ahmed believed me, and he pursued it, and he finally got the Americans to capitulate and admit that there was a woman prisoner in Bagram. You talked about the evidence that was given in court in New York. There was actually nothing wrong with the evidence, the scientific evidence that was given. The scientific evidence given in that court completely exonerated Dr.Afia Siddiqui and tied in with the eyewitness statements that I was given by the Afghan policemen who were there when Afia was shot, and they all told me that Afia did not touch that gun. In fact, the only Afghan who said Afia touched that gun is now living in New York with a green card. You can draw your own conclusions from that. Let's face it, Afia was never going to get justice in the US. And I think that although we prayed hard, we hoped, we campaigned, I think we really knew what the verdict was going to be. Because if the American jury had decided that Afia was innocent, that then would have meant that their country has taken part in a crime that is of unbelievable proportions, involving the kidnap of children, involving the kidnap and rendition and torture of a mother and her 3 children. Well, as I say, I don't think any of us really expected her to get justice in America. And when my colleagues from the Pakistan media are refused entry into the main court and shunted off into 2 side rooms, I think that tells you a lot about what was happening in that court. And in fact, I wrote a letter to Judge Berman, and I asked why was he running an apartheid system in his court where he was keeping all of Afia's supporters out of the court along with the Pakistani media. I tried to fax the letter to Judge Berman, and his assistant called me back and said that the judge had banned me from using his fax machine. I said, we're in London, his jurisdiction doesn't extend that far. How are you going to stop me from sending a fax? But I sent it by a courier firm in the end and copied in the US Attorney General to find out why, when we have someone like President Obama in the White House who says he's standing on the platform of equality and justice, there is an apartheid system running in the court. So we knew that Afia was not going to get justice in the US. And I'm afraid from the phone calls that I've been making with supporters who've been trying to get politicians on Capitol Hill interested, despite the fact there's an election and we know that you politicians become particularly receptive during an election, they don't want to know. American politicians don't want to know anything to do with the war on terror. So we're not going to get anyone from Capitol Hill really campaigning for Afia. Demonstrations, we've tried them in the UK, but they're not that great in numbers. There are a lot of committed people, like all of the people in here, who are doing their bit for Afia. But the place where we have to go to get justice, I think, is back in Pakistan. That is where the great demonstrations are. That is where the people will march in their thousands and thousands for justice for this wronged daughter of Pakistan. Afia has captured the hearts of so many people, and we have to put pressure on Yusuf Raza Gilani to demand her return. And the best way that we can do it is by petitioning, by marching, by rallying, by protesting, by the people who have the biggest hearts and the loudest voices and the determination to do it, and that is back in Afia's home in Pakistan. I watched TV with such, really, it made me feel emotional when I saw all those people marching in Peshawar, in Lahore, in Karachi, in Islamabad, right across an entire nation was up in arms for what had happened to our dear sister so many miles away. And that is where we are going to get justice for Afia. And that is where we have to put the pressure on before this judge sits down in the first week of May and issues his verdict. Because we know that the verdict is going to be the worst possible verdict. The one thing that the Americans don't want to do is to give Afia any sort of voice. So we've got a battle on our hands to get her back. But we have to get her back. And then we've got an even bigger battle, and that is trying to find her children and to get her reunited and to try and find out how many other women have been swept up in the war on terror, how many other children have been swept up in the war on terror. I was told that the Americans very much wanted Ahmed, an American citizen, to go back to America when his mother was arrested in Ghazni. And it was only by the intervention of Hamid Karzai who stopped Ahmed from going to America, where the Americans wanted to take care of him in a mental institution. God knows what would have happened to that boy. He's recovering with the love and affection and determination of his family, and he has a story to tell. And when he tells it, I think it will create another wave of anger. But our focus at the moment must be on getting justice for Afia and getting it from the only place I know where people really care about justice, where people will march for justice, where people will walk the length of the country for justice, and that is back in her home in Pakistan.
Passionate as ever, I'm really proud of her sense called Sister Yvonne's sister. She's always stood at the forefront for any injustice, and particularly in the case of Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and of course Dr.Afia, she's played a key and vital role, and sometimes I believe she's put her own life in danger by going out to Pakistan, Afghanistan and other war-stricken places, and she does a credit, and I hope that others would follow suit.